Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about our next storm that'll bring the risk for significant severe weather both today, tomorrow, and Thursday. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the East Coast. That is where our low pressure system that was non-tropical is finally moving off the coast. You'll notice that little spin. It's very hard to see, but there is a little spin just off the East Coast that is now moving out to sea, and we'll eventually see that high pressure system back in the Northeast start to fill in again, bring a drier weather and as well as warmer temperatures to areas in the Midwest and as well as the Northeast. Overall though, for the rest of the United States, there's really not much going on right now. We do have a little bit of convection really across a large chunk of the United States. It's very isolated stuff. What I mean by convection is just isolated storm activity, so there really is not a whole lot ongoing right now, but that is at first sight because we actually have a dry line set up here across the high plains back over in West Texas and as well as into Colorado. There is actually a dry line setup, which basically means we do have an initiator for significant severe weather later today. That is something you cannot see here on the infrared imagery, so a huge setup for today for some quite significant severe weather, mainly for the threat of damaging winds and large hail. I'll talk about more on that here in a moment, but let's talk about more about the jet stream because we'll actually have more chances of severe weather this week, not just today. And today's severe weather isn't necessarily coming from the jet stream. So these are the upper level winds going into tomorrow. You'll notice there's actually a trough back over in the southwest United States. That is something we need to watch for very closely because if we have a trough ejection, we could see some significant severe weather sometime around Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of this week in the United States. Meanwhile, for the rest of the country, we have that other trough back over just exiting the Carolinas, and that has also been bringing some heavy rainfall to those on the East Coast. And then we have our ridge back up into the Midwest and as well as into the Northeast that's keeping areas dry over there. Once we go throughout the next few days, though, you'll notice by Wednesday into Thursday, we start to notice a little trough ejection here in the southwest United States. We have a bit more of a westerly to even southwesterly flow, but we don't have a whole lot of strong upper level winds here on the eastern side of that trough. So that means that we'll probably see the severe weather wise, we'll probably not see a whole lot of significant severe weather out of this particular setup. But if it is able to strengthen and it moves into the central plains, we could see some significant severe weather start to ramp up, maybe back over in the high plains. That seems like the best chance right now. For the last week or so, we've been seeing a lot of severe weather in the high plains. We might see more of that out of this sort of trough ejection. Once we go into Friday and as well as into Saturday, that trough fizzles out. So as you might notice, there's really nothing over here in the Midwest other than that huge ridge. We're just going to continue to see dry and warm air in areas like the Midwest and as well as throughout a large chunk of the Great Plains as well, and as well as the Northeast. Once we go into next week, no really big changes yet. We might get another trough ejection, but again, that's really thinking long term, and at this point, it's very uncertain really past next Monday what we'll actually see in terms of severe weather and as well as rain coverage across the United States. We'll break down the severe weather more in depth in just a moment, but this is the future radar for the next several days. We'll begin with tomorrow. We'll see showers and storms continue across the Great Plains. That is going to be a trend in the Great Plains for the next several days, as it has been, by the way, for the last several days. And you might be wondering, why is that happening? Well, we have a ridge back over in the Midwest. That's going to create those strong southerly winds, which is carrying tons of Gulf of Mexico moisture throughout the Great Plains, and it extends all the way back into Canada. I'll show you more of a detailed look at what that actually looks like on the dew points in a little while. Once we go into Wednesday into Thursday, showers and storms again continue in the Great Plains. We actually could get a small tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico. It's something to watch for closely. I know we're only a couple days away from hurricane season, so this is actually gonna be something to watch for, but for right now, this is not gonna pose any threats of like a hurricane at this point, but it'll be something to watch for, potentially some sort of development there. Showers and storms will continue in the southern and central plains. We might see more significant severe weather potential going into maybe Saturday or so. Friday and Saturday seem to be two of the days to really watch for across the Great Plains, especially in the central and southern plains. And then once we go into next week, again, things become more uncertain, but you'll notice the European model is spitting out a potential tropical cyclone. We'll have to watch that closely, but again, I'm not really confident about any sort of tropical activity right now, just due to the fact we are so early into the season, and again, we're looking at long-term computer models. That's a little far out from right now. All right, let's talk about more on that severe weather potential for today. We'll begin with today. Very interesting day ahead. You might already be thinking, we didn't have an enhanced risk of severe weather yesterday. Well, this just got issued by the Storm Prediction Center today. There is currently an enhanced risk of severe severe weather. It's a fairly small area, but it's definitely noticeable. It does include areas in southwest Nebraska, very far eastern Colorado, into western Kansas, and as well as even into parts of the Texas Panhandle. Main concern for today will be the risk of flying trampolines, and that's really the damaging wind potential. You'll notice there's a hatched area right now for damaging winds that extends again from the same areas where that enhanced risk is. Look at the hatched area though. That is where we could see damaging wind potential upwards of 80 miles per hour. You might be thinking, what does this mean on the trampoline meter scale? For right now, we do have an extreme risk of flying trampolines. This is actually one of the highest risks that we've ever had for this region, and that's going to be for that enhanced risk of severe weather or that hatched area. So if you're in either one of those, you do currently have an extreme risk of flying trampolines. Make sure to turn over your trampoline, hatch them down, whatever you got to do. Just make sure you're protecting those trampolines today, because there will likely be some flying trampolines back over there in the parts of the western and central plains. Now, for the hail potential, there right now is not really a significant hail threat out of this area of storms. For right now, it's about a 15% probability within a 25-mile radius, anywhere in that yellow shaded region, and that's going to be for later this afternoon into the evening hours. And then for the tornado risk, it's pretty much zero. We don't really have any sort of tornado setup here across the central plains at this time. Now, for the timing today, we'll see some showers and storms start to bubble up even back over near Kansas City going into the late afternoon. But more concerningly, right around about 5-6 o'clock is when we'll see a large cluster of storms develop from about South Dakota into the Texas Panhandle, and that is where we could see some significant severe weather. You'll notice here that is where our greatest threat of severe weather is. It might not look like the best line of storms to you on the future radar, but this is actually going to produce some pretty significant damaging winds. So you want to make sure that you are prepared for damaging winds and even a hail threat today. Once we go into the evening hours and past sunset, this is by midnight, these storms will fizzle out pretty quickly. This is mainly a daylight heating sort of event, so we're not really watching for significant severe weather going into the overnight hours in terms of a nocturnal threat. So that's good news there, but there might still be some showers and storms out there overnight. Just overall, the severe weather threat will be much lower by then. And then the risk for tomorrow will shift south. We do have a slight risk of severe weather across the high plains. That's mainly for large hail and damaging winds, but there is a very low chance for an isolated tornado. We'll have a little bit more of a low-level jet tomorrow, so that might equivalent to maybe an isolated tornado, but overall, again, the threat is low at this time. For the timing, we'll be watching for showers and storms to pop up really during the mid to late afternoon, so possibly a little bit earlier than today, maybe closer around 3 to 4 o'clock, and then those storms will eventually move off to the east. Most of these storms will weaken after sunset, but we might still see some isolated damaging winds out there, and then eventually the severe weather threat will start to diminish after midnight. Now, for the overall threat of severe weather on Thursday, it's fairly low right now for tossing trampolines on trees Thursday. Very low threat for those in the high plains back down in western Texas and as well as the Texas Panhandle. Again, damaging winds, large hail is the main threat. That area might grow though over the next several days, so stay tuned for that. Now, for the overall moisture in the United States, I did mention I was going to show you guys this. Overall, it's very interesting. Again, we have a very strong southerly pull out of the Gulf of Mexico. That is from a high pressure system back over in the Midwest, and that will continue for the next several days. For those in the Midwest, I have no good news for you, honestly. It's just going to continue to stay really dry over there. You'll notice going into next week, the European model is spitting out a very strong high pressure system that will keep your area even drier than it currently is. So definitely not good news there, but that strong southerly pull will continue across the Great Plains, keeping areas in the Great Plains with the threat for some severe weather for the next several days. And another huge announcement for all the YouTube members that we have. If you're not a YouTube member, you can click the join button down below if you want to be a member on the channel, but you can officially now purchase merchandise on our store. Make sure you're on our Discord server and you'll be able to get the link to our store for the early release session. We'll have a full release to the general public likely on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.